All right, welcome back. So if you've ever dipped your toes into Django, you've definitely gotten that classic hello world to pop up on a page. But let's be real. How do we get from that one little line of text to building actual, dynamic, professional-looking websites? Well, the answer is all about moving past that simple starting point and unlocking one of Django's most powerful features.
It almost always starts right here, with this single line of Python in your views.py file. And look, it works. It gets something up on the screen. But hiding inside this seemingly innocent piece of code is a giant headache just waiting to happen as soon as your project starts to grow.
So, let's just pause and look at this. What is the big deal here? We're just putting some text inside an h1 tag. Seems harmless enough, right? So why is mixing your HTML directly into your Python code considered such a huge no-no in the world of web development?
And that brings us to what I like to call the HTML in Python problem. It's a trap that pretty much every single new Django developer falls into, and it's really the first big hurdle you have to clear to learn how to build websites the right way.
Think about it this way. Trying to build a whole complex web page by just stuffing all of your HTML into a single Python string, it's kind of like trying to draw the entire blueprint for a house on the surface of one single brick. I mean, sure, it might work if you're building a tiny doghouse, but for anything bigger, it becomes a complete and utter mess. It just doesn't scale.
Yeah, the problems show up really, really fast. The code gets incredibly hard to read, debugging it is a nightmare, and collaboration, forget about it. You can't just ask a designer to tweak the look and feel when they have to dig through a bunch of Python code to do it. Your backend logic and your front-end presentation are just tangled together in a knot.
So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, thankfully, Django gives us a really powerful and honestly super elegant one right out of the box. And that is his template system.
Okay, so let's get on the same page. What even is a template? At its heart, it's just a file, usually an HTML file, that lays out the structure of your page. But the real magic, the key idea, is that it separates that fixed layout from the dynamic data that you're eventually going to plug into it.
And this whole system has a name. It's called DTL, which stands for the Django Template Language. It is a core fundamental part of the framework that was designed specifically to solve this exact problem of mixing your presentation with your logic.
Okay, so how do we actually start using it? It's way easier than you might think. It's basically a simple three-step process to get your project all set up to use templates instead of those messy, hard-coded strings.
First up, you just create a new folder called Templates, right in the root of your project. This is going to be the home for all your HTML files. Second, you have to pop open your settings.py file and tell Django, hey, this new folder exists. And finally, you just update your view function to use the much nicer render method.
And this is the line that does all the work. Inside your settings.py file, you find the big template setting, and right there in the DRS list, you just add this one line. All you're doing is telling Django, hey, whenever I ask for a template, make sure you look inside this templates folder I just created. Simple as that.
And this slide just perfectly shows you the payoff. On the left, you've got the old way importing HttpResponse and returning that ugly string, but on the right, the new way. We import render and we just tell it, hey, please use the home.html file. It's so much cleaner, so much easier to understand what's going on.
Okay, so we've separated our HTML from our Python. That is a huge win. But now for the really cool part, the part where all the power comes from, making these templates dynamic. Let's see how we can actually send data from our Python code directly into that home.html file. We do this by adding a third argument to that render function, a Python dictionary. We call this dictionary the context. So here, we're creating a key called name, and we're giving it the string value, naveen. This is the data that we're passing over to the template.
Now we hop over to our home.html file. How do we get that data? We use this special syntax, the double curly braces. When Django's template engine is rendering this file and it sees double curly braces, name double curly braces, it looks inside that context dictionary, finds the key name, and it replaces this entire placeholder with its value.
This little name thing, that's what we call a template variable. It's really just a placeholder. Think of it like a bridge that lets your Python backend talk directly to your HTML frontend and send it information. And then, when the page finally loads in the user's browser, Django has already put all the pieces together. It takes the static h1 hello ... from the HTML file, it combines it with the dynamic value naveen from our view, and the user sees the final perfectly rendered result.
And here's the part that should make it all click.
If you go back to your Python view right now and change that name from Naveen to Kiran, you don't have to touch the HTML file at all. You just save the Python file, refresh the page in your browser, and the content updates. That right there is the definition of a dynamic website. So why do we go through all this trouble? Why is this so important? Well, it all comes down to a really fundamental principle in software development, and that is the separation of concerns.
I mean, just look at the comparison. The old way is messy, it's hard to maintain, and at the end of the day, it's basically static. But the Django way, it gives you this beautiful, clean separation. Your Python code handles the logic and the data, and your HTML files handle the presentation. It makes your project so much easier to manage, to scale, and to make truly dynamic.
This quote from the source material just sums it all up perfectly. The real power here isn't just making a web page, it's being able to control what that web page says from your Python code without ever having to go in and edit the HTML file itself.
But it's so important to remember that we have only just scratched the surface here. Template variables are just the beginning. What if you could do more? What if your templates could actually use programming logic? You know, like for loops to display a whole list of items, or if statements to show or hide content based on some condition. Well, that's where the Django template language gets even more powerful.